Well, relations between the U.S. and Iraq seem to keep getting worse. Now, the U.S. has decided to cut off Iraq from all weapons sales. I guess it's not all military aid. But the U.S. has had a contract with Iraq that was signed back in 2016 to supply them so many weapons, over a period of time to be paid in installments and to be purchased. And they are not even going to complete the contract. It's not like they're going to, deny Iraq future, arms deals. They're going to just quit the deal that they're in now. And this is pretty significant, I think, because the U.S., of course, supplies arms to all of its allies. That's one of the big ways that the U.S. projects power is by producing, the weapons that all of, its allied countries buy. It's a very cozy relationship. The U.S. Dominates over these foreign countries, and then they are able to bring in their contractors like Boeing and Lockheed Martin and Raytheon, and they sell them lots of weapons. And then this works out well for everyone. The contractors make a lot of money. The foreign governments get weapons to build up their military, and the U.S. of course gets to influence by these countries by playing the middleman. But you see, the U.S. will only do that. Will only make these great deals, these wonderful deals that President Trump loves to go on and talk about, with countries that do as the U.S. says, that play nice with the U.S. and pretty much do their bidding. Now, Iraq recently has gotten a bit uppity. They have decided that they somehow have a right to kick out the U.S. troops, which legally they do. I mean, officially, the U.S. troops are there at the behest of the Iraqi government. They were invited in with a very specific purpose to defeat ISIS. ISIS is pretty much defeated, as the U.S. general in Iraq said quite recently that the Shiites are a much greater threat than ISIS, meaning that ISIS is pretty much gone now. And so it makes perfect sense for the Iraqis to say, okay, now U.S. troops, you can go home. But even though legally that is, that's how it works de jure, de facto, the Iraqis do not have a right to tell the U.S. to leave. This is an unwritten law, okay? It is the law of being a satellite state. America considers Iraq to be within its sphere of influence, to be a part of its, global empire. And so they need to have troops there, and if they wanted to take their troops out, they'd do that themselves. Of course, even if you're, say, the President of the United States, you might not have the power to do that. Not that, Trump has tried overwhelmingly and has put in the best effort, but I'm saying, if you had someone in there who was truly committed to pulling all the troops out, they may very well be removed in a deep state coup. Not that that's happened to anybody recently. And so the empire really works as this corporate body that has a life of its own. It has mechanisms in place to fight off infections, kind of like white blood cells. And that's what we're seeing now, basically, by the U.S. denying, taking this one step to deny arms sales to Iraq. Now, it's pretty significant that a country like Iraq, which, it's not like they have some evil, radical Muslim, government or something like that. Or it's not like there's some other kind of, really scary bad government. By world standards, the Iraqi government, while corrupt, is not that bad. I mean, they're not vile human beings. Unlike, say, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, one of the U.S.'s closest allies, a country which, I don't think I need to go over what the problems are with Saudi Arabia, but the U.S. has no problem selling them weapons. And in fact, if you question selling weapons to Saudi Arabia, well, I mean, you might just be anti-American. Because you see, it's very important that the U.S. Gives weapons to its allies in the Middle East. Because if the U.S. just cuts off arms supplies willy-nilly to a country, well, then the rest of the countries that are currently allied with the U.S. Will start to see the U.S. is not as reliable of a partner. But of course, that's a very dumb excuse, because here you are, you see them doing that here to Iraq, and what do you think all the other countries that are currently purchasing U.S. arms are going to see from the example of Iraq? They're going to say, well, it looks like if I don't do exactly what the U.S. says, wants me to do, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, well, then I'm going to lose them as a partner. they're not exactly friends. This doesn't seem like this relationship is a two-way street. It seems like a one-way street, to where, I do what the U.S. says, or they cut me off and sanction me and turn us into a pariah state. Which, of course, is exactly what the U.S. has been threatening Iraq with since they first voted to expel troops from the country. They have said, "Hey, we're going to sanction you. We're going to bankrupt your economy. We're going to seize your assets at the Federal Reserve Bank of New York." That should be a lesson to anybody. Hey, get your money out of the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. But that is another problem with, not doing what America says, is that America, controls the global financial system, not only through, the dollar, which is the world reserve currency, but through the, SWIFT. You can't really conduct international trade unless you're on good terms with the United States. And of course, a country like Iraq, which is largely a petro-state, they rely on exports to make all their money. And so the U.S. really has them over a barrel. Iraq exists to the extent that, that they have any prosperity and any stability there, which there isn't much, but there is some. Things could get worse in Iraq. To the extent that they have any bit of civilization there, it is sort of at the whim of the United States, and that can disappear at any point. All that has to be done is the President of the United States can just snap his fingers, and all of a sudden Iraq is Mad Max. And just to pan out for a minute again, what is all this about? Why is the U.S. so upset with Iraq now? Well, it's because the U.S. has finally really figured out that after all these years of trying to win over the Iraqi Shiites from the Iranians, that the U.S. has realized that the Iraqi Shiites do consider Iran to be more of an ally than the U.S. They like Iran better. And so forced to choose between the two, the Iraqi government is happy, taking both American money and being friends with Iran. But if they have to choose between American money and being friends with Iran, they're going to pick being friends with Iran because that's their next door neighbor, and they've, cultural and religious ties with them. And a lot of them, like I said, have lived in Iran. And so the U.S. is really trying to give them an ultimatum. They're trying to break this love triangle and make it clear to Iraq that, you're either with us or against us. And we're seeing this bubble up again in the wake of that attack on the Baghdad embassy this Sunday, which didn't seem to get a lot of press attention. I'm not really sure what happened because I was waiting, on the night that it happened. I was hoping to talk about it and get some information out, but really nothing ever came out about it. Apparently, a couple of rockets. That they're being described as hit the U.S. Embassy dining hall in Baghdad, but we don't really know who did it. Apparently, these were some kind of older model rockets. Well, not like model rockets like you would build in your backyard, but older type of rockets that are not used, say, by the popular mobilization units anymore, which of course the PMU are all those Shiite militias that are, very friendly with Iran because they work for the Iraqi government, which is very friendly with Iran, and is known to launch these little potshot attacks at the U.S. But they are saying we had no involvement in it, and this wasn't even a kind of weapon that we use. We don't have these in our inventory anymore. And, the PMU has not been shied away from taking credit for these attacks when they have committed them in the past. So there's no reason to believe that they, shot a few rockets at the U.S. and then are now denying it. Now, Pompeo, when he came out, Mike Pompeo, the Secretary of State, really didn't even get into who exactly did anything. He just blamed Iran for it. And then speaking directly to the Iraqi government, he actually had the balls to say, hey, this attack by Iran on the U.S. Embassy was a blatant violation of Iraqi sovereignty. I found that to be a hilarious line because he's clear. I mean, he clearly sees the irony in what he's saying because, of course, Iraq has been very upset that the U.S. assassinated Soleimani on its soil without its permission when Soleimani, was in Iraq to visit the prime minister. He was on there on an official visit, and the U.S. assassinated him. And Iraq said very, appropriately, that this is a clear violation of our sovereignty. And so now Pompeo has the balls to turn that around on them and say, oh my gosh, look what quote-unquote Iran did. Isn't this a wanton violation of your sovereignty, Iraq? But again, we have no idea who did this. I mean, nobody, I guess, was killed in this attack on the U.S. embassy, and nobody's claiming responsibility. And we don't have any evidence. I mean, for all I know, it could have been the CIA that did it as a false flag thing to, because it's not like it was a big deal of an attack. They didn't kill any Americans. But this could have just been something to try and put pressure on the Iraqi government, because that's what Pompeo's doing here. He's making it all about the Iraqi government and their responsibility to protect the U.S. embassy and their strong relationship with the U.S., and they're saying, now is your chance, Iraq, to prove that you're our friend and not Iran's friend. Look, Iran attacked us, your friend, and so if you're a friend to the United States, you'll protect us, whatever that means. I mean, I don't really know how you protect how the Baghdad police are supposed to protect from somebody shooting rockets at your building, unless they know where they came from and they can go arrest the guys. Now, what'll be interesting, something that I haven't really seen come up in the media yet, is when will the sort of anti-Iraqi government propaganda start coming out? When will the U.S. decide to publicly start admitting that Iraq is not their friend anymore, and that everyone in America should hate Iraq? To try and when are they going to start saying, hey, Iraq is just an Iranian puppet? When are they going to give up the game there? Because, of course, that would be even though they pretty much seem to have figured that out, that would be a huge admission on the part of the U.S. government to the American people that, hey, we just spent, 17 years in this country trying to make it into West Germany, and it's turned into Iran, who we've been telling you for the last at least 20 years is America's greatest enemy in the world, because, they're Israel's greatest enemy, which, again, it's not even entirely clear why they're Israel's enemy. Because, of course, back in the 80s, well after the Iranian Revolution, both Israel and the United States were just fine with Iran. I mean, the Iran-Contra scandal was not about, as I've said before, was not about the U.S., conspiring to do something against Iran. No, Ronald Reagan colluded with the Iranians to break federal law. It doesn't sound like something you would do with, America's greatest enemy. But anyway, I mean, if you've been alive in America in the last 20 years, you have been propagandized to death to believe that, Iran is the most evil country on earth, and that they were a part of the axis of evil with Saddam Hussein and Kim Jong-il. And so, all the U.S. would have to do is come out and admit that Iraq is, pretty closely aligned with Iran, and then the American people would understand, okay, the Iraqi government is evil now. But the U.S. has not done that yet. They're doing more less overt, not covert. I guess implicit is the word I'm looking for. They're putting more implicit pressure on the Iraqi government. The question then becomes, if all else fails, and the U.S. does pretty much decide to officially declare Iraq a rogue state, meaning a state that doesn't do their bidding, what will happen then? Is there going to be will the propaganda campaign just be to demonize them, or will it be as a sort of a foundation for another Iraq war? Because it's pretty clear that if Iraq wants the U.S. troops out, and the U.S. isn't going to leave, and tensions continue to degrade between the two, and there's no, and Iraq doesn't basically capitulate and say, oh, okay, America, we understand, we love you, and you'll be here forever, well then, what's going to happen then? Is there going to be a full-out, fourth Iraq war, essentially? I mean, it's hard for me to see that at this point because, well, I mean, for one thing, it'd be very unpopular, but I think it'd be pretty easy for the government to, smooth that over with American voters just by saying, okay, well, Iraqi government equals Iran, and they attacked us first. Those two things, if they can just get those 2 points across, well, then I think people would be okay with another Iraq war. And so I think what matters at this point really is the determination of the Iraqi government, and if they're going to continue to say that, we don't really like America. Are they going to continue to defy the will of the administration? That is the big question here. So far, even though they seem to have softened a bit in that, they're not acting like they can kick the U.S. out, they're still making it very clear that they don't want the U.S. there, even though they have no power to remove them. So with that said, if you gained anything of value out of this video, I'd appreciate you clicking that like button and sharing this video. If you haven't already, please do subscribe, because I do upload every day, and I'd hate to have you miss one. So I'll see you folks back here tomorrow.